Hi, I'm Jim Knotts, President and CEO of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund. Welcome to today's virtual reading of the names. 2022 marks the 40th anniversary of the dedication of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Washington, D.C. As part of our commemoration, we'll host an in-person reading of the names at the wall from November 7th through 10th, 2022, when all 58,281 names on the wall will be read aloud. In the lead up to that event, we'll be reading names each day online while sharing the photos of these heroes. For our daily virtual reading, the names of the service members will be read by month and day of death between the years 1956 and 1975 in alphabetical order for the given day. We apologize in advance for any mispronunciations. Know that our readers are doing their best to honor these service members. We hope you'll listen and watch each day and share with others as we remember and honor those who gave their lives during the Vietnam War.
Robert Carl Anderson, Leon Anderson Jr., Richard Andrade, Glenn Lawrence Atkinson, Frank Anthony Azarito Jr., Luther Nettles Bagnell III, Robert Irving Ballard, Isaiah Barnes Jr., John Peter Bartley, Marco Joseph Baruzzi, Ronald Jean Bauman, Howard Duncan Bennett, Harold Edward Berg Jr., Donald Carl Berry, James Bird Brandon, Wilbur Ronald Brown, Russell David Bryant Jr., Martin James Burns, Langdon Gates Burwell, Robert Anthony Bye, Larry George Cannon, James Lewis Carter, Michael Oliver Cassidy, Michael Bernard Cervera, J. M. Childress, Rudolph V. Sestaro Jr., Thomas Clark, Arthur Clark, William Michael Coombs, Leslie Lawrence Cowden, James J. Crawford, Jesse Carl Creekmore, Timothy Daly, Christopher Mika Daniels, Otis James Darden, Raymond Carl Davis, Raymond Frank Demery, Alvin Joseph Derrick, Leslie A. Dickinson Jr., Robert Lee Dixon, Carl Dingus, Dwight Samuel Douglas, Orrin Leonard Dyer Jr., Dale Arnold Eckhoff, Bruce Einier Engstrom, Glenn Otis Irvin, Russell Thomas Fant, Adam Fisher, James Eskell Forsman, Nolberto Frosto Jr., Gordon Dwight Gardner, Robert Allen Gifford, Don Ray Gilbert, Gary Lee Glear, James R. Godwin, Harold Leroy Gray, Milfred Ray Green, Gerald Bruce Greendyke, Charles Edward Green, Dennis James Gula, Dennis Allen Haynes, Anthony Joseph Haynes Jr., Jerry Rankin Haley, Leon Hamner,
Robert Taft Hanson Jr., Harold S. Higginbotham, Leonard Hugh Holmes, Edward Wendell Huey, Charles Sid Jackson, Earl Wayne Jennings, Ronald Charles Jensen, Leslie Arthur Jersted, Vernon Zigmund Johns, August David Johnson, Adok Vaso Johnson, Lester Johnson Jr., Robert Fred Johnson Jr., Larry Hugh Jones, Danny Lee Jones, Paul Richard Karras, Joseph Francis Cardos, Eugene M. Korecki, Joseph Ronald Landry, Leonard G. Langhorne, William Ronald Larkin, Holton Lau, Fernando Leal, Harold Eugene Lee, William Fred Lestage, Donald W. Lowe, Larry Robert Maddie, James Edgar Malone, Edward Banowski, Michael Stacy Massoni, James Kevin McCann, Edward McCorvey Jr., Ricky Claude C. McCoy, John Winchester McGuire, William Harvey Miller, Thomas A. Moravec, Stephen Brooks Murden, Larry Edward Newman, Casimir Nispadziani, Thomas William Ott, Robert Glenn Painter, Edward Milton Parsley, Jack Allen Peacock, Daniel Pena Jr., William Russell Phillips, John Robert Poff, Paul Anthony Preslomsky, William C. Cabado Jr., David Quinones, John Sidney Rasmussen, John Raymond Rebitz, Timothy Charles Reitman, David Lee Rickles, Ernest Arbalo Rivera Jr., Jimmy Karen Robertson, Zach Oscar Rowland, Charles J. Sabatier, Howard Sadler Jr., Stephen Carroll Sanger, Joseph Santos, Dale Howard Schmidt, Manuel Teodoro Segura, John F. Shaughnessy Jr., Robert Eugene Sherlock,
Paul Theodore Short, Jr., Dennis R. Seiverling, James Earl Skipper, Philip Jeremiah Smith, Edmund Eugene Smith III, Wendell Spencer, Jerry Lewis Spicer, Ernest Allen Spong, Robert L. Standerwick, Richard Eugene Stanton, Richard Cortland Stewart, Charlie Aces Stewart, Jr., Wallace A. Stockstill, Jr., Joseph Lamar Stone, William Sterling Stringham, Bobby Allen Taylor, Malone Bennett Temple, Elvin Jean Tennyson, Jackson Thomas, Vincent Robert Thornburg, Roger Blake Jernberg, Morton Elmer Towns, Jr., Eugene Durwood Treadwell, Robert Randall Van Gilder, Howard Gregory Vaughn, Thurman Morris Waller, John Thomas Walls, Robert Dennis Ware, Robert Merrill Warnock, Dan Thomas Washington, Wallace Wayne Webb, John Newt Weber, David Wilbert Wares, Terrence Wayne Weldon, Dennis Ray Wicker, Wallace Luttrell Wiggins, Robert John Williams, Marion Earl Wilson, Barry Lee Wolk, Charles Henry Wright, Thomas Franklin Young, Richard Clive Youngbear, Saul Zayas, Charles Edward Zuniga,